All right, everybody, time to rock some of these exercises. This is exercise 40, page 53. Let's start and do the first 5. So, hoi fugades, hoi menusin, en to stratopedo uk akusin, elpidas, that should be one word, meta tein make. So let me scratch this out and write in the rest right there. So what's going on here? We have hoi fugades, a nice third declension that we've just learned. Hoi, looks a lot like that hoi with another accent. That's going to be our relative clause marker. Then we have this phrase. At some point this relative clause ends, and then we have the rest of the sentence. So let's get started. Hoi fugades. Well, that's going to be the, and then fugades. The fleers. Literally, what's this from? Well, it's from felgo. These two are not unrelated. But we have a better word than fleers. They're exiles. They're fleeing from the country. So the exiles who, and why can I say who here? Well, what's hoi? Well, that's nominative, masculine, plural. So we can see from this that that's going to be the subject of its relative clause, and because it's masculine and plural, this is referring back to fugades, that's the antecedent. So we know what's going on here. The exiles who, and we're going to get more information about those exiles. Who referring back to the exiles. Alright, so the exiles who menusin. Well, what does meno mean? It means remain. So who remain in to stratopedo. This is pretty new vocabulary. So this is in the, I guess we might say, military camp or maybe army camp. So strato related to stratia. Let's just say in the camp. I guess that word's not as new as it is, we just haven't seen it that much. So the exiles who remain in the camp do not have, well, here we have a new verb, and this means that without a connector, without an and here, our relative clause must be finished. So we can kind of close that off here and say, the soldiers, the ones who remain in the camp. So that's basically all an adjective. This is all just telling us, what's going on, what about these exiles? So something that's useful about a relative phrase and a relative pronoun, relative clause I mean, is that we couldn't have a language that had an adjective for everything. A certain adjective like sophos that means remaining in camp. That would get old very quickly. These relative phrases allow us to say more adjectively to further describe a noun. With verbs, with other words, with other nouns. We don't need to create a big apparatus. We can just use these relative pronouns and relative clauses to fill out the information that we want to know about the nouns that are in our sentence, our chief sentence, our primary sentence. So the exiles who remain in the camp do not have, and then elpidas, what's that? That's a new dental stem, third declension. This is not hopes. And then meta, it's a new preposition, but takes the accusative after the, and then what's make in battle. So the exiles who remain in the camp do not have hopes. This is the main sentence direct object, main sentence verb, main sentence subject, after the battle. Nice little prepositional phrase. If we wanted to mark our relative clause, we've got our relative subject with hoi, a relative verb with menusi, and then we have a relative prepositional phrase with en to stratopedo. The exiles who remain in the camp do not have hopes, maybe we'd just say hope in English, after the battle. Sounds pretty bleak. Let's move on to prettier things. He nesos en he ein kala dendra u mikra ein. Well, this is a whole lot of new vocabulary. He nesos is not new though. Second declension ending, feminine however, the island, and then en hey. Well, what's that hey? So we could say on, because that's the kind of island thing that we're talking about, not so much in the island. What is hey? Well, we have iota subscript, rough breathing, circumflex accent. This must be a relative pronoun. It's certainly not any adjective we've seen. Also, it's not a, which means or, nor is it he, like we just had with nasos, which means the. So nor is it a, which we've just learned, smooth breathing, which means I was. No, so we've got a lot of etas with squiggly lines over them at this point, but this is he with this iota subscript, meaning feminine, dative, singular, relative pronoun. So on which, we might say. And how do we know what this he is referring to? Well, nasos is both feminine and singular, so that fits the bill. Now, why is this dative, though? Well, and the preposition takes the dative, so really our relative clause is starting with this prepositional phrase. So if we want to block it off, it really starts with that n. So en he, on which, ein kala dendra. Well, what are kala dendra? That's beautiful, and then dendra, trees. This must be nominative or accusative plural. Ein helps us out here. What is that? Well, it could be either I was or he, she, it was. So this is going to be the third person because we've got kala dendra. Why is it singular? Well, that's because neuter nouns, when they're the subject of the sentence, even when they're plural, take a singular verb. So on which there are beautiful trees. More literally, we might say on which beautiful trees exist. But in English, we tend to use this kind of dummy filler, there, as a placeholder to say there are beautiful trees. And then that's going to be the end of our relative clause, because now we're going back to Mikra, talking about the Nasos, the island. So, was not small. And let me make a small correction here. I got carried away with the linking verb. That wasn't are. What is that? What is ein? Well, that's was, or in plural, were. So on which there were beautiful trees. The island on which there were beautiful trees was not small. How do we know Mikra doesn't go with dendra in this case? Could, as a kind of type B adjective, because it follows, the final vowel follows either epsilon, iota, or rho, in this case rho, and blocked the great vowel shift. We've got an alpha here, but sure looks like, it could be a short alpha going with dendra kala. How do we know? Well, sense kind of gives it away, but the other thing that gives it away is by the time we're at this oo, and we know we're getting a new verb, we know this relative clause is closed. This has come down, and nothing outside of it is probably going to be referring back to things inside of it. Relative clauses tend to be outward looking. So the island on which there were beautiful trees was not small. This is all main sentence. So that's our main sentence predicate, main sentence verb, and our main sentence subject. The island on which there were beautiful trees was not small. Good. Let's move on to a longer one. Hopefully it won't be too bad. U radion estin e heriskein tus leontas e lambanen autus. So u radion estin, we've seen this before, means it is not easy. So again, this it is somewhat of a dummy filler in English. There's really no it here. It says is not easy. Why does radion have two acute accents, one there and one there? Well, this first one's just part of the dictionary entry. If you were to look this up, you would see radios, radial, radion. Why do we have this one here? Well, that's because estin is enclitic, and because there is no accent on either the ultima or the penult originally, that can take this acute accent. So it is not easy. And then what is this A? Well, let's go back to our chart over here. Smooth breathing and acute or grave accent, that's or. But note that we have two of them, so that's going to be an either or scenario. So it's not easy either. And then this is not easy phrase invites a complementary infinitive. So it is not easy either to discover, to find. That's nice. All right, so it is not easy to find tous leontos. let's say the lions, but of course that could be just lions as a class. It's not easy to find lions. Question, why do we have a new ta here? Why hasn't that gone away? Well, what is the stem? We have leon, tas here, and leont is our stem, and then we have an alpha sigma. Well, that alpha is not going to get rid of anything, but then imagine when we were in our nominative, what do we have? We have leont, and then we could add either nothing or a sigma. What would happen if we added the sigma? Well, that would make this leonts. The ta would drop out, it would kind of corrode before the sigma, so we'd have leonts, and then that sigma would also corrode the nu, and we'd be left with leos with a long vowel, like a leos. So that's almost what we have here. What is the nominative form of lion? It's leon. So why is that? Why do we have leon? Well, the fact is we're not adding a sigma here, and just that ta at the end drops out. But we do have this kind of compensatory lengthening. There's more than just a short nu here, and that's why we have a long omega on leon, but then a short omicron on leontos and down the line. So we still have compensatory lengthening. We have some CL going on there, but we don't have the sigma. We don't have that kind of corrosive movement that we do have elsewhere. And we will have in the plural of lions dative, which is going to be leosi. But that's neither here nor there. All that we need to know now is it's accusative in the direct object of hieriscating. It is not easy either to find the lions or, that's the second A, to capture. That's lambane. And then autus, well, what does that mean? That means them in this case. This is a pronoun usage. It's not the attributive. It's not ha, leon, autos, which was intensifying the lion himself or itself. Back to that debate, are animals he's, she's, or are they its? Nor is it ha, autos, leon, which would mean what? The same lion. So that's not either of those. This is the pronominal or pronominal usage of autos. It is not easy either to find the lions or to capture them. Excellent. Let's move on. He come ekthra ein tois barbarois hon he stratia estratewen. All right. Let's tackle this at the beginning. The village. That's easy. We're used to working with come. Ekthra. What does that mean? Hostile. Well, what is that? Is that attributive? Is that predicate? How do we know? Well, we get the form ein. What's that going to be? It's past tense. In this case, we have a third-person singular subject. That's what it's not going to be I was, but it was. The village was hostile. So subject of the main sentence, subject, predicate right there, and then we have our sentence verb, and we have our predicate, and then our sentence verb here. The village was hostile. Note that here we have something that hasn't been explained by Shelmerdine, but a dative of reference, we might say, or maybe of interest. Sure, there's hostility, but hostility has an object. Somebody, you tend, unless you're Groucho, or not Groucho, Oscar the Grouch, not to be hostile toward everything and everyone. You have objects of your hostility. You like some people, you don't like others. So this village was hostile. Well, who is it hostile to or toward? It's hostile to the foreigners, the barbarians. Hone, what's that? Well, that's our genitive, plural, and we don't know the gender yet, relative pronoun. But we only have one plural noun preceding this, so we can be pretty sure we're talking masculine here, and that it's referring back to barbarois. So let's see if that makes sense. The village was hostile to the foreigners whose, because that's going to be possessive, whose stratia, whose army, estratewen, was, nice imperfect here, right? Past indicative augment, good imperfect ending, no case marking, no sigma there, that would make that aorist. So whose army was marching, was on the move. So the village was hostile to the foreigners, and then here starts our relative clause, whose army was marching. On its own, the army was marching. This genitive is referring back to the barbarois, but then also is dependent upon he strati, whose army. So also note that this is not who apostrophe s, which is who is, this is whose, which is possessive. Frustrating that apostrophe s in English is used for possessive on proper nouns like Alex's or whatever, but whose with this se that we don't see elsewhere is actually the possessive relative pronoun. So we're learning a lot about English as we learn some Greek along the way. All right, last example. Let's see if we can wrap this up. Hog xenophon autos epause ten machen dia ten nukta. Good. So hog xenophon, this is one of our new vocab words. This is a proper name. You may have heard of Xenophon. He was a writer of the late 5th century, wrote both kind of philosophical texts that dealt with Socrates, but was also fought with the Spartans when they were in what's now modern-day Turkey, wrote something called the Anabasis, the ascent, the up hike, the march uphill, but now we just have him as a person of interest because he has a great well, here's what it looks like in English, but then he has a great, in Greek, neuta, third declension name. So we have xenophontos in the accusative. If we were just to drop the nts, which we have in the nominative, that's how, just like Leon, we get xenophon. Accent would normally go earlier, but this is actually a contraction, so we get it on this omega. That explains that. It's not a genitive plural first declension, it's a contraction. No need to bother with why or what right now. All we need to know is that's nominative, and it's masculine, and it means the Xenophon. We're just going to say Xenophon. Xenophon followed by autos, himself, as we just saw a few seconds ago. Minutes ago at this point. Xenophon himself epause. Sigma, that's indicative of something. Not the, well, it is the indicative tense, or indicative mood. Epause is the past indicative augment. So this is past tense, and this tells us it's aorist, as does the ending. So Xenophon himself stopped. And what did he stop? The battle. Tein maken. Good accusative, singular, feminine. Dia tein nukta. Well, what does dia mean? It can mean a few things, but with the accusative, it can mean on account of. Considering. Tein nukta. The, and then what form is this? Well, this is one of our examples from the week. Nux, and then nuktas. Hey, the night, and then our stem is nukta, or nukt. Adding this, short alpha, that's what we have for the accusative feminine singular, on account of the night. Y'all were probably 5 steps ahead of me there. Xenophon himself stopped the battle on account of the night. Let's spend a couple seconds just reviewing what we've done, what happened. So we had our first relative clause here, hoi. We knew it was referring back to hoi fugares because it was masculine and plural. We knew it was the subject of this clause because it was nominative. It became the relative subject of the relative verb menusin, followed by the relative prepositional phrase ento strato pedo. This closed the relative clause, and we followed it up with the rest of the sentence that ultimately went back to hoi fugares. Also, note that in my edition of Shelmerdine, at least, there's a kind of spurious punctuation mark there. That should not be there. Ignore it. I ignored it when I wrote it up, but note how even I've had some errors where this epsilon was separated from the rest of elpidas. Good. Second sentence. He nesos en he en caladendra u micra ein. So we had our subject, and then we had our relative pronoun actually follow a preposition. We saw that this tends to happen with prepositions. It's dative because it's the object of the preposition, but it's feminine and singular because it's referring back to Nasos. The island on which there were beautiful trees was not small. Here we didn't have any relative clause at all. We just had this new ta form of the third declension noun. We also had some nice complementary infinitives working with this fixed phrase, it is not easy. Note that in both these sentences, there and it, these are dummies that we need to supply in English, where Greek doesn't have a word for that and doesn't need one. The inflection of the language takes care of it. Here we had he come echthra ein tois barbarois, or barbarois hon he stratia estrateoen. So this hon was interesting because it meant whose, and this genitive was being possessive of the army, which was, this is a little strange that it works so efficiently, but it's really smooth. Hon means whose. And it's plural and masculine because it's going with barbarois. Something that came up in class as I was discussing this line today, how do we know that this isn't a possessive dative? We've had that with forms of to be. How do we know that a hateful village was for the barbarians? The barbarians had a hateful village. Well, we know that is not the case because this is a predicate, very emphatically. It's not attributive. If we had another hey there, that would be a different story, but we don't. We need to treat this as a predicate, and just because of the semantics of the word, because of what it means, hostile, that invites a dative. It invites this dative of reference or interest. Hostile, yes, but hostile to or for whom? And then finally, Xenophon himself stopped the battle on account of the night. No relative clause here. We have this nice intensifying use of autos. We have a new prepositional phrase with this new third declension noun. Good. See you next time.